Holy shit! I gotta get my ass out of here. Hey guys, it's Steve from Scooter King, and today we are out on the RS5 Max. And we're gonna be making some adjustments to our shocks. And it's a pretty easy thing to do, but you're gonna need a spanner wrench to do it. I've tried it a couple different ways, and if you do it with anything else, if you do it with a pair of channel locks or pliers, you're just gonna thrash it. So you'll end up chewing up the gears and it looks like crap when you're done. So the spanner wrenches are really cheap. They're easy to get off Amazon. I'll leave that info in the links below so you guys can check it out, but it's a cheap update, and I mean, it's a cheap tool, you know, for adjusting the shocks, and it's just, you know, it's always the same thing. Get the right tool for the job, it'll make it a lot easier. So anyway, we're gonna make some adjustments to the shocks. If you're a heavier rider and you're out on the RS5 series of scooters from Roadrunner, it might be just perfect the way you are. They're a little stiff, you know, when they first come to the, you know, when you first unbox it, they're a little on the stiff side. But I'm an average size and weight rider of 178, and they were a little stiff for me. So we're just gonna make a couple of turns of adjustment and see how much of a difference it makes, and see if it's worth dealing with, see if it's a hassle, you know, whatnot. And we'll go from there. So first up, like we mentioned, you're gonna need a set of spanner wrenches, and these were really inexpensive, like 14 bucks off Amazon. But you're gonna see here in a little bit why it's important to have the different sizes, because they come in handy when you're trying to work around the shocks, especially the rear shock. Pretty tough to do without multiple sizes. We're gonna start with the front because it's a little easier just because of the way it's set up with the front fenders. And while it is possible to get in there with our spanner wrench and actually adjust from here, it's a little more challenging to get around the fender here. So it's much easier if you just pull the fenders off. It's not that big of a deal, and they come right off. And we're gonna go ahead and just undo the fenders. Once the front fenders are off, it's a lot easier to get into the actual shock itself. And there's one thing we got to do before we do anything else, and that is locate the lock pin. This is just a little hex bolt that's between the teeth of the adjuster here at the front shock, and you've got to unscrew that a little bit so that it's free to turn. It doesn't take much, just a couple of turns at most with your Allen key, and it's enough to free that. It might still be a little tough to turn just because of the force on it, and if that's the case, a couple of squirts of WD-40 around the threaded area right at the top of the shock here, it does wonders. You don't have to put a ton of this on here, just enough to loosen the threads and kind of get it moving. You may have to put a small block or a piece of 2x4 between the actual front swing arm and the deck just to kind of brace it so that you're not turning against thin air. It's a lot harder to do, but once you do, it's actually pretty easy to move these guys around and get them to where you need them. The front swing arm is really the one that needs the most amount of adjustment. So after you've done a couple of turns on the shock adjuster, remember to retighten the little hex lock pin here, and this just keeps it from moving around during really rough rides and, you know, really long commutes. Then just reassemble the front fender and just be mindful of that brake lever cable there. That's the only thing that's really in the way of the first hole, the one that's closest to the motor, so you might have to move that around a little bit, but other than that, pretty straightforward for a reinstall. Having multiple spanners is going to come in really handy for the rear shock, because the rear shock is actually adjusted on the bottom and not on the top. Same process as the front. Remember to loosen the tiny locking hex screw so that it's free to turn. And of course, it has to be said that this would be a lot easier if you remove the back wheel. But in our case, we just recalibrated the brakes and aligned them, so we didn't want to go through that entire process all over again. It is possible to do, it just takes a bit more patience and time to get it done because you're going to be moving it probably 1 or 2 teeth at a time. But after several hundred miles of riding, we found that the rear wheel was actually loosening up quite nicely, and that actually felt pretty good. So really only a couple of turns was more than enough for the rear swing arm. Now that we've made some tweaks to our suspension, both the front and the back, using our spanner wrenches that we got off of Amazon, we can try this on a couple different surfaces and see how it's actually gonna react. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is try this out on some straight up street driving, and especially roundabouts. So we got a bunch at our town, and these roundabouts, if your suspension is too stiff, they get kind of chattery, a little jumpy around the curve. And of course that leads to loss of grip and traction too. So let's spin all the way around this guy and just see. See if this guy sees me. Oh yeah, okay, so definitely, I can definitely feel an improvement there. It holds on to the curve a little better, which is a really nice kind of surprise, really. All right, we'll cruise on over here to the park. This is a great place to test for suspension, mostly just because they have miles of like this crazy rough cobblestone, and they got lots of grass and stuff, so good terrain test here. All right, so first let's get a little bit of grass test. Oh hell yes! Let's just look off here in the middle of nowhere. Oh yeah, way smoother on the back for sure. This thing just cruises through this. Oh man! All right, and then this cobblestone is another great test because this stuff is pretty brutal. And it's definitely a little more forgiving for sure. Yeah, all you can really hear is just the tires. Got a little bit of whirl on the tires, so pretty sweet overall. Oh, I think I just saw some lightning over to the west over there. Got some clouds up here coming in, but still about 85 degrees out here, so a nice day on the river for sure. All right, let's try over the bridge here. And this is a really rough surface right through here. And we'll take a trip down, go a little off-roading here. And this is a really good test as well, because this is just straight up off-roading here. And yeah, definitely a lot smoother for sure. A much more forgiving ride. It's just used to be pretty chattery. But on this, it's, yeah, quite a bit smoother. I came down here before, right after I first got it. Got the RS5, and it was pretty stiff. You know, I mean, I was kind of chattering, you know, my teeth for the first couple of runs, but this is definitely much smoother for sure. And I think on this case, this really matters in the front, because the front suspension's doing a lot more absorbing. Like the really quick bumps, that kind of stuff. That's where the front is really gonna, you know, come into play a lot more. So for sure, yeah, this has definitely been a successful upgrade by far. Woo. So yeah, definitely worked out great, man. So a little bit of tweaking for the front and the back makes a huge difference, and certainly an overall smoother ride for sure. But we got rain coming. Holy shit! I gotta get my ass out of here. We got some rain clouds coming in here. It looks like it's gonna start dumping here in a minute. Damn! So we're gonna have to book our way on home. But thankfully, we got this big ass 32 amp battery saving our butts. So time to put some of the top speed of this baby to use. Whoa! And get our ass out of here before we get wet. Thank God for good tires. Yeah. Hell yeah. Come on, baby. I hadn't really planned on testing out the water rating of this scooter, but here we are. I guess we're already there. Boy, this thing's got no problem climbing up these hills, man. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me, you guys. I appreciate it. I'm going to book on home here before it gets too much nastier. Remember to like and subscribe when you get a chance. Ride safe, have fun. We'll catch you guys in the next video.